All right. I had the privilege of getting to visit your kindergarten classroom and watch a foundations lesson. So we've set aside some time today to reflect on that. So what do you think went well with that lesson?
Well, what stood out to me the most, I think, is that the major work of that unit was them identifying 8 sounds and being able to apply that sound knowledge to decoding words. And so when we did our chain to read and our chain to spell, I thought they were really successful with applying that and being able to do that independently.
Okay, so you felt they were able to apply those skills to their chaining to read and chaining to spell. So when you think about the lesson, what might you have done differently?
Well, as the lesson as a whole, I honestly don't know that I would have changed much. And I think that is in large part due to the fact that it was a flex lesson. So I had the ability to choose the pieces that I felt like they needed based off of trends from the unit assessment, the prior unit assessment. So I think that is what kind of helped it to be a lesson that I felt really confident about, and I didn't really feel like there was a lot that needed to be changed.
It was very evident that it was a well thought out, planned lesson, and it was definitely based on the student data that you had looked at, and so that was very obvious. So share with me the planning process that you used during that lesson.
Okay, so what I started with, especially with it being that it was the end of Unit 3, so I knew it was going to be a flex day, and for those days I want to really focus in on what results I got from the assessment. So when I sat down to plan, I had my assessment next to me and the data from my students so that I could use it to choose the pieces that I felt like would work best for targeting some of the errors that I noticed that came up on the assessment. So a few of the things that kind of stood out to me was some sound confusion. I felt like, especially with the g and the k sound, some of the words that they were choosing on the assessment, like instead of caught, which is what they were supposed to be choosing, a lot of them had chose got, and it was kind of overwhelming. The majority of them that missed it, that was the one that they had chosen. I also kind of noticed some sound confusion with the d and the g sound too. So I kept that in mind as I was planning. And of course I wanted to keep the structure of what a typical lesson looks like for them. So I tried to design it so that I was starting with the sound slide, that I was reviewing those large cards just like we always do. But then I pulled in some activities like minimal pairs. When I looked at the targeted support stops, that was one of the things that they suggested, especially for like sound differentiation. So I chose one from lesson 8 that really focused on the g and the k. And so we went through that. They had to listen to the 2 words I gave them and identify the sound that I was looking for. So if it was got and caught, and I said I want the sound that has the k, they would have to be able to say caught. They were really successful with identifying all of those. So that made me feel good about them applying, at least with sounds. So then I had to think about, they're able to hear it, but are they able to distinguish it when they see it? So I felt like moving into chaining to read would be a good way to see if they're making that connection when they see the letter. And so for our chain to read, I chose a list from the targeted support stop that actually had some of those words that were most missed on the assessment. Dig and caught were the words that were missed the most, so those were included in my chain to read list. And then chain to spell as well. I chose some of those same words from the assessment. I got that list from the targeted support stop as well. But really just trying to target some of those errors that I had noticed in the assessment so that, you know, I could feel like I was getting a true picture, and I could feel confident in moving on to the next unit.
I really like that you took the structure of a regular lesson with its routines and then incorporated into that flex day. Those routines are, you know, important. You did a great job analyzing the data and identifying what was needed, and I like that you used and incorporated words that you knew that they had errors on, and you even broke it down to even the individual sounds. And I noticed during the lesson too that you had called up specific students to do the chaining. Tell me about that.
So I tried to think about pulling a variety of students. So I chose some students so that, I knew that they had scored higher on the assessment, and I wanted to use them kind of at the beginning, and I purposely chose them at the beginning of the activity so that they could be a good peer model, so that those that maybe do have a little bit more hesitation with training to read, that they could have that model to kind of help them to remember this is what this looks like. And again with the chain to spell as well. And then I also tried to choose some students who specifically I wanted to target from the assessment. I knew they had missed that word, and so I wanted to see how they were going to attack it, either chaining to read or chaining to spell. And then some of the students I chose because I knew that they needed that encouragement to be able to get up in front of the class and try. And I had one student who wasn't successful the first go around, and so I had to scaffold back for them, but with that scaffolding and then the encouragement from their peers, they were able to get it, and I think that made a huge impact for them. So
I did notice, the kids were very complimentary of that student. It was something that was exciting to see, and you had even focused on kids who had made some errors. You gave them an opportunity to build that confidence and knowledge in that moment. And based on what you've said, and again mentioning the culture, it was very positive in your classroom, very positive culture. So why do you think that is?
Well, I think we first as teachers kind of set the example with our attitudes and kind of how we approach when a student gets something wrong. So it's kindergarten, and this is a hard skill for them, and they're able to really show amazing growth really quickly, but I feel like it's something brand new to them. They're not used to putting those sounds together and blending, so there are going to be struggles at the beginning. So I just try to make sure that I don't ever say, well, that wasn't right, I'm going to get somebody else come up and try it. So I try to scaffold it back for them while continuing to encourage and praise their effort. They are trying, and I think the kids pick up on that. And so when they see me handling it in that way, I think that it encourages them to also kind of be encouragers. And so I noticed that day when one of my students in particular who did struggle with being able to chain to read, I had him come up and use his sound slide. And, the kids were, when he was finished, so excited for him because they knew,
Mm-hmm.
that it was a skill that he's working at and still having some trouble with. And so there was, clapping when he was done and high-fiving. Mm-hmm. And so, and I try to get excited when they do have those moments. And I think that the kids, they respond how you respond. So if you're responding with positivity, I think they pick up on that and do that as well. And I feel like with this, especially with these foundations lessons, you need to have a good positive energy in order to keep them engaged, because it is a lot of them having to listen and repeat, or them having to copy something that you're doing at the beginning, when you're doing those sound slides and things. So I think if you come in with a positive energy, it kind of just
spreads the cheer, spreads the joy. And that modeling of behavior is important, and it was evident too that it played over with the students and among them.
They know their I think setting those routines, procedures, and expectations at the very beginning, and then continuously repeating those with each lesson. you get them where you want them to be pretty quickly if you do that.
You're saying definitely that consistency is important. Just based on what you've said, and we've talked about the lesson you planned and how you worked through that flex day, what do you think your next steps are?
Well, thinking about the flex days that I had and the data that I was able to gain from those, because those were more of, anecdotal notes that I was taking in my mind and then writing down and reflecting on later. And then, some of the work that they produced as well. I felt like, based off of what I saw and even the unit assessment, that we were ready to move on to Unit 4. But at the same time, I want to be conscious of the fact that there are still students who are making some of those errors. And so making sure that I continue to pull in some supplemental things, whether it be during RTI time or small group time, and, even whole lessons, making sure I insert some of those words that could still be, causing some struggles, especially with those sounds that they were confusing, into our activities like chaining to spell and chaining to read and those things.
So your plan is to work it into small group, work it into RTI, and still practice those trends you noticed on assessments to make sure they still have some consistent practice. I appreciate you sharing your thought process through your planning. I think that is a good model, and bringing into that student-to-student encouragement into your classroom. It's really important. Do you have anything else you would like to share today?
I think so. Just thank you for the opportunity.
Well, I appreciate
talk
it.
about
I appreciate your time and your reflectiveness and the time you put into it every day. I know you do an awesome job, so I guess that's it.